Hey everybody, welcome to another video review. So this is the long promised, I guess, review, not that long, but promised review of all of my Master Replicas Darth Vader lightsabers. Certainly a blast from the past. And I don't really know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to have to I guess, cut and splice a lot of different little videos to kind of get everything done. And I guess also talk a little bit about some things that I missed in some of the past reviews. So I think I'll start by just kind of moving along and just kind of showing everything. There's no backdrop, unfortunately, so you can just kind of see my, very busy background, all my statues, my busy, huge kitchen counter. Because there's no background large enough to block this out, and this is under the light, so it's still really, really nice. I don't want to do it on my kitchen table, which I've done in the past. Sometimes I have so many big collectibles I have to do it in the kitchen table behind me, but I prefer not to because the light's not as good. So here we go. I guess if you want to do this in so-called, I guess, story order, sequential order, this is from episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and you can see here that this is the Vader lightsaber, and there are 2 plaques. So there's the limited edition 1302, and then there's the plaque with the worldwide edition. The interesting story with this, by the way, is that I think later on, because of just financial reasons, a lot of things happening as time went on, I think Master Replicas was trying to cut some corners here or there, and basically they only made the plaque that gave you the limited edition versus, for instance, the older plaques that actually gave you your number out of a total. I mean, I don't understand. It's just kind of silly why they couldn't have just done 1302 out of 3000, but they didn't. And then there was, I guess, an uproar among the fans, and they wanted the total edition size, and so Master Replicas had to go and make an additional plaque with giving you that information. The date it was released, as you can see here, is November 18th, 2005, and the worldwide edition. Guys, if this is part of the reason they went out of business, is because of nonsense like this, right? So there was a lot of maybe self-injury, right? But that's why you'll have certain, Revenge of the Sith lightsabers, Vader lightsabers, or you have a lot of other Master Replicas lightsabers near the end of their run, where there will be double plaque. I think Darth Sidious lightsaber was another one where it's a double plaque, and the reason they make a distinction is because you have to write to them, or you have to do something to pick up this extra plaque. It wasn't automatically given to everyone, because of course by the time they made these so-called limitation plaques that tells you how many was made, these things have been sold. And so you had to care enough to email or write them, and then they would have to give them your address, and I don't know, they had to pay a little bit of shipping or something, and they would send this to you. And so that, of course, split the product into sabers where the original owners cared enough to get the second plaque, and then you had sabers where the original owners never either were ignorant of this opportunity or didn't care enough, and they only had the 1 plaque. And so obviously it's better to have the 2 plaques, but anyways, that's what was going on. There was a little bit of chaos in case you couldn't figure that out near the end of the MR line, and you had this sort of stuff happen. So that's the story behind these double plaques. Okay, so here we go. Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and then we're going to move on to episode 4, A New Hope. This is the signature edition. So as you can see, there was no signature edition for the Revenge of the Sith Vader. And then we move on over here to The Empire Strikes Back, a signature edition. And then finally over here to the Return of the Jedi signature edition. Interestingly enough, I found out that for this over here, I have put the saber, or had oriented it incorrectly. So this is the correct orientation because you have the space to put these plaques on this side. So in this case, the Revenge of the Sith Vader saber is pointed this way, which is the same orientation as the Empire Strikes Back. And so if I try to go back a little bit, and you can see all 4 Vader sabers along the curve of my eyelet. So hope you enjoy that. And then what we're going to do to remove the glare is I'm going to remove the acrylic case from each of these, so we can more easily appreciate these lightsabers without the glare from the case itself. So here we go. And then again, we're going to back up. I'm going to back up as much as I can. So hopefully you could get a shot of all 4 of them all together. And then we're going to be able to check things out. This is the saber, now you can see, without the acrylic cover. Here it is. And this is Empire, of course. And this is Return of the Jedi. Okay. Here again are the different plaques. I polished all of these. I have to say, under the camera, it looks a little bit better even than in person. There's a lot of grime and dirt. And I can probably still afford to polish it even more if I wanted to, but this is good enough. But you can definitely clean it even more. And because, I mean, I've heard from different people like this is silver. I would be really blown away if this big entire thing was silver, but it's going to tarnish again over time. I mean, hopefully it won't take it will take a little bit longer, but you know, if it tarnishes again, you have to polish it again with brass or malms. So there you have it. By the way, as I look over these things, you know, there are going to be very, very minute imperfections. I think, for instance, you know, my Star Wars A New Hope Vader is one of the most perfect because the collector I bought it from literally sealed, you know, protected. But you can tell that the acrylic case has a little bit of yellowing. And again, this just has to do with the quality of what Master Replicas, you know, paid for. I mean, over here, my Revenge of the Sith, there's like a very, very small, minute little scratch here. You can barely see it right over here. So there's that. Here on this saber, if you look at the little corners here, you can even see a little bit of the glue that's holding the T-tracks spinning out a little bit. You would have to be very, very close to see it. You don't really see it on this end, but I think if I try to focus a bit more, you'll be able to see that. You know, for here, the Empire Strikes Back, acrylic, there's definitely little, very, very fine little tiny scratches in the case. My Return of the Jedi one is actually one of the most pristine. I really can't find too much wrong with this one. But yeah, you know, these are all things that when you're talking about 20-year-old heirlooms, you know, there's no true perfection in my mind. I mean, there are occasional guys out there in the world. I mean, they have their collection, you know, like humidity controlled, temperature controlled vaults. They're very, very anal. But you're only as good as the material that Master Replicas spent money on in the first place. And those materials were not really meant to house the Mona Lisa, okay? And they have a shelf life, and over time, it's going to slowly degrade. Now, again, if you preserve it like the Last Supper in the Louvre in France, you may be able to slow it down, but you know, you will be limited by the quality of the original starting material. So there are going to be collectors out there who have that level of quality, and they do deserve to charge a premium, you know, for that. but I would say it's maybe 1% of all of these collectibles, maybe 2%. That's kept in that good a condition, and I'm pretty happy with the condition of my lightsabers. I would say this is definitely top 5% in terms of in terms of quality and how well it's preserved and all of that. Okay, so now that we've sort of got a chance to look at all 4 of them in a row, I think it's time to start really having fun and taking some of the lightsabers and beginning to compare and contrast and see how they've evolved over time. So I think I'd like to start with the New Hope lightsaber, and we'll begin the comparisons. And I'm going to take a break from this video, and after the cut, we're going to have the lightsabers off of the plaques, off of their display cases, and a lot closer together, so we can more truly appreciate those differences. I'll see you after the break. Okay, welcome back after the cut. So I've sort of set up my little space so we can start the comparison. I've already done, of course, very long dedicated reviews of each of these lightsabers by themselves. And so that's not really the point of this. The point of it is to sort of showcase the evolution of the Darth Vader lightsaber from movie to movie. And so we should, of course, begin with the first time this was seen in 1977 with Star Wars: A New Hope. Again, the highlights, this is from an MPP flash gun, the D-ring, the thumb screw, you have the bent nail with this little metal attachment to hide the nail going all the way through, the bubble strip from the calculator. This is the clasp, the side of the clasp moving up, the T-tracks, and of course the ports, the B port, all of that, the D-ring, and then the shroud. So, this is the lightsaber that sort of set the tone in the beginning with all of the major components. And I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that the shroud in this area always had this sort of rectangular shape right over here. And this was very much carried through. This is the kind of the one of the features that's been carried through from all of the different movies. So there you have it. And then if you compare the New Hope Vader with the Empire Strikes Back Vader lightsaber, you'll see that there are not that many changes. If you take a look, for instance, at the shroud, you can see that it's essentially identical. You have the same D-ring, the same shroud, the rectangle, you have the screws, all of that is basically the same. The major difference is that instead of the empty ports, you have the ports in essentially the same location. The B port here, the B port over here compared to the B port here is a little bit larger, and there are of course wires placed through these ports, multiple wires on the Empire Strikes Back version. So comparing that, if you look at the hilt at the bottom, they're very similar. The rubber made for the handle, is essentially the same as well. So, moving down, the Empire Strikes Back has, again, the different colored wires going through the ports. But the location of the ports are essentially identical. You can see from here And if you move over here, you see that. These are the so-called S ports, which are essentially identical if you were to look on, if you want to look at that. And then over here, it's also basically the same, even down to the small porthole over here. These small holes are identical, except this has wires. When you want to come to the clasp, you can see that the bubble strips are also about the same. There's 6 here, 6 here. That's also very identical. Now, in this case, they took away the bent nail, and for the Empire Strikes Back, it was just a simple screw all the way through, and this was secured in place with a washer. And finally, if you'll notice, the T-track grips and the handle is a lot closer on the Empire Strikes Back version. They got rid of the space here, and they made, again, the clasp a lot closer to the T-tracks. So hopefully that's pretty easily appreciated from the New Hope versus the Empire Strikes Back. So looking at that, there is some notable changes, but honestly, not a whole lot. You can see again, very, very similar in the shroud. Moving down toward the clasp, there are some cosmetic differences to the clasp, but again, the bubble strip is still present. There's a little bit of wiring, and then the major difference is the fact that there's more of the flash gun exposed in the New Hope version. And the Empire, again, the clasp is right on top of the grips. But otherwise, these two lightsabers are very, very similar, and you can see how the Empire Strikes Back version was just a very mild evolution of the original New Hope lightsaber. So now we're going to put this back. I have to actually remember how it's done. So it's done like this. So I'll put it back like that. And then I'm going to put my Empire Strikes Back lightsaber as well. That looks good. And then we come to the Return of the Jedi version, which, as you can see, is essentially almost a completely different design. This is off of, you can see the actual stick that was cut off here. There was really no shroud. This is not off of an MPP flash gun at all. It's off of the Graflex flash gun that was the essentially the basis for the Luke Skywalker lightsaber. You still have the clasp very close to the grip, but the actual strip is now completely replaced with these two screws. So there's no bubble strip. There's no, there's no calculator essentially at all. You still have the rubber T-tracks. And then here, they're just basically, shaved down screws, again, sanded to, or cut to the actual flash gun, from the Empire Strikes Back stunt saber that Luke used. Because this was not an original MPP, they actually fabricated the shroud, and they kept this sort of rectangular portion of the shroud to do homage to the original Vader saber. So very, very different design, as you can see. If I move the camera a little bit, you can hopefully appreciate that difference. Or what I'll do is I'll just lift the, it's kind of tricky. Don't want to drop, obviously, a $3,000 lightsaber, but you can see here that the rectangular shroud, which was part of the MPP flash gun they had to fabricate, but is really, really different, especially the clasp is completely different, comparing the two. And then of course, you know, the actual portion of the flash gun with the ports are completely changed as well. So this is truly very, very different when they went to the Return of the Jedi for the reasons I discussed in my video review of this piece. But I really like, again, these little screws. It gives a unique touch. You can actually turn these screws if you wish, but we're not going to do that. So there you go. The jump between the Empire Strikes Back lightsaber and the Return of the Jedi lightsaber was a huge jump. And you can see how the evolution of the New Hope Vader to the Empire Strikes Back Vader was a very, very, you know, very subtle one. They're definitely different, but not ridiculously so. And finally, we come to the Revenge of the Sith, which I reviewed 3 years ago. But at that time, I didn't actually show the paperwork, so I'm going to do that now. So what came with the Revenge of the Sith paperwork is this instructions, how to properly polish and maintain these acrylic cases. Since I do have a little bit of scratch, I may follow the instructions. Minor surface scratches can be removed by sanding out the scratch with 400 to 600 grit wet dry sandpaper, followed by a polishing compound and a good grade of automotive paste wax. This sounds a little bit scary and complicated for someone like me who has never done that before, but okay, whatever. I don't know what this is. I get a feeling this might be what they want you to use to polish it or something. I'm not sure. This is the cloth that was included, so you can handle it. And then this is the certificate of authenticity. And because there's no signature, you don't have a actual picture of Hayden Christensen signing anything. So you can read this at your leisure. Pretty generic talk. And again, because Revenge of the Sith, Vader lightsaber was made in, what is it? November. You can actually see the plaque right here. It was made November 18th, 2005. They no longer had the signature of the LucasArts or, you know, head, and the Master Replicas head didn't have the signature here, which is, you know, I kind of missed that. I'll let you read this at your leisure. This is they talk about what went into making the lightsaber, a little bit of background on Anakin Skywalker. So here you go. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can clearly see it. All of these lightsabers are very, very heavy because they machine these out of metal. It says right here that's undergone the most changes. They're not lying. Episode 4 to 5, mild change. 5 to 6, huge change. And then, of course, by the time they got to episode 3, it was yet another change. This was machined from aluminum with accented copper and aluminum details. So you can read all of that. So that's the certificate of authenticity for all of this. So that's pretty cool. And I think one of the really cool things about this lightsaber, you have to trust me on this, but this is by far the heaviest of the Vader lightsabers. It's like honestly insane. Focus out again. It's just ridiculously heavy. And by this time in the film cycle, remember that these other guys were original trilogy, 1977, 1980, 1983. And so Star Wars was very different back in the late 70s, early 80s than, the late 90s when, the sequel, the so-called prequel trilogy came out. There was a lot more money. They had a lot more resources. And so there was no longer the need to go to a MPP flash gun and recreate Vader's saber. You didn't have problems necessarily with props walking off the set. They didn't have to jury rig, Luke's stunt Empire Strikes Back lightsaber and turn it into the Return of the Jedi Vader lightsaber. Like, this beauty was fabricated from the ground up, with a $100 million budget. It was fabricated along with all the other, effects from the ground up to be, Vader's lightsaber. But of course, they stuck with a homage to the original MPP. And so even though this shroud is not, there's no original shroud like with MPP flash gun, they still designed it with this kind of, rectangular portion that we've seen in all of Vader's lightsabers. In fact, you can argue that, this is the one thing that's actually remained pretty constant throughout, that you have this rectangular portion of the shroud in all of them. But it's just accented, with these aluminum, metal, aluminum accents. Here's the emitter right here. Again, very classy. There's an aluminum bar right here that you can see. This is not the sort of rough shroud. That, textured, grainy shroud was only seen in the New Hope and Empire versions of the lightsaber, because again, they were from the original flash gun. The one for Return of the Jedi and the one for Revenge of the Sith is, a lot glossier and more finished, almost like matte black, because again, these shrouds were fabricated specifically for the lightsaber. So instead of the wires and the ports, you have these accented copper ridges. Very, very beautiful accented details here. And then, rather than having a Texas Instruments bubble strip, this is now, again, hand fabricated with etched details to kind of give you that extra hint of class. And you can see that the side strips are now nice and black. There's a little extra groove over here. You can see that. And then here, again, homage to the original bent nail and screws. They added this sort of accent. So all of this is kind of meant to pay respect and to honor the design choices from before. It's there to try to evoke the memory of earlier Vader lightsabers, but with a much more sort of modern, refined, machined look to it. It's not quite as charming, let's just say, as an antique, but it's just, very, very good. And of course, you have the T-tracks over here. You have this extra added, detail with a screw right over here on the side. And then, of course, the very end of the hilt. The clasp is still very close to the T-track, which is the same with, the Return of the Jedi, as well as the Empire Strikes Back lightsabers. This is the only saber, again, that has it. The New Hope is the only saber that has such a distance between the clasp and the handle. Okay, so I wanted to point out again sort of the texturing. You can hopefully see the texture here between the original MPP shroud and then, of course, the machined Vader saber from Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3. There's a bit more color to this. I guess it's sort of like, comparing an antique Ferrari with like a modern LaFerrari or an Enzo Ferrari. This is sort of like the Enzo or the LaFerrari, the modern, sleek design. Very, very beautiful, very, very heavy. The one thing that's a little bit disappointing about this version is that it doesn't have a D-ring, which all of the other models do. All of the other Vader models have a D-ring at the shroud area. I mean, Return of the Jedi has 2 rings, a D-ring and an O-ring on both ends. But this one doesn't have a D-ring at all. It has this thing here, but that doesn't really count. So, I have to tell you, I really am not a huge fan of the prequel trilogy of movies. There's a lot of problems with it. I don't really like the whole mythology, the overblown, overly complicated mythology of the fall of Anakin Skywalker and the Immaculate Birth from the Force and Darth Sidious's contrived plan to bring about the fall of the Republic and all of this stuff. Like, I'm not a really big fan of that, but I have to say that in terms of the design, I mean, that prequel came out with some gorgeous, gorgeous props. The Mace Windu hilt, the Count Dooku hilt, even Darth Sidious, this Vader is no exception. And while this unfortunately has none of the emotional resonance of the original trilogy lightsabers, I have to be fair. I mean, you look at this hilt, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, this is kind of like it's like this is the Vader hilt on steroids. And I get it, I get that The Empire Strikes Back, is like a lot of people's, including mine, favorite favorite Star Wars movie of all time, and one of the favorite movies, period, of all time. But and so there's nostalgic value to that. But when you kind of compare the more simplistic design of of that lightsaber, which is just a very simple evolution of the original classic New Hope Vader, and that was just an MPP flash gun with some calculator elements thrown on, some rubber T-tracks. It's just, you can't compare that to how beautiful this thing is. So again, it's kind of hard. I want to be gentle here. But yeah, I would say this is sort of like the ultimate Vader saber, the ultimate Vader hilt. If you want to talk about weight, design, beauty, love this lightsaber. And I hope that both showing you this here in this comparison video and in the other separate dedicated video review, you'll have an opportunity to truly kind of appreciate the details, how amazing that this is. You can see here, 2005 Lucasfilm. Sadly, not a signature edition. It was not available for this one. This is a limited edition. I wish Hayden Christensen had signed this, but I guess it would have been weird. He only signed one lightsaber from Attack of the Clones. He didn't sign the one from Revenge of the Sith, and he didn't sign the Vader one. I have no idea why these things are are so? Is it because of budget? Is it because of availability of the actor? I mean, how can you have Liam Neeson not have a signature edition of Liam Neeson's lightsaber? How the hell could you not have Ewan McGregor do a signature edition of any of the lightsabers? I mean, that is insane. They made a lightsaber of Obi-Wan from each of the prequel movies, episode 1, 2, and 3. Episode 1 was an elite edition version that was only a Collector's Society exclusive. And you didn't get McGregor to sign. Like, what the heck, right? Was that a McGregor problem, or was that a Master Replicas problem, or they just broke? I mean, what in the world, But they still got Mark Hamill to come back and do a version 2, Return of the Jedi. That was like the last lightsaber I think they ever made. Unless you count the Mara Jade one signature. They got that signature. So it's just a little bit of a mystery, right? Why some things get done and some things don't. But regardless, I really wish there had been a signature version of this baby. It would have been amazing, but there isn't. And so all we have is this. I said 3 years ago that this was my favorite version of all of the Vaders. And I have to say, even all these years later, even though this is probably the cheapest of all of them, you can probably get a really good version of this double plaque, all of that, for about $1,500. That's how I bet $1,500 will get it done, in my opinion. And all of the original trilogy Vaders are going for anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000. $3,000 to $4,000, depending on how lucky you are, depending on how complete they are, if you can even find them. A lot of those original trilogy sabers, their condition is just atrocious. But in the ones that I have in decent shape, it's going to cost you $3,000 to $4,000 minimum. So even though this is the cheapest, I do stand by the fact that this is absolutely the best looking, the best feeling, most amazing. It's awesome, And in doing this comparison review, I reminded again of how truly awesome it is. So I'm going to take this off of the handle. You can see this is what I use to make my reviews. So yeah, a final panoramics of all of these. Hopefully, you following me, you'll get a chance to truly appreciate all those differences between all these lightsabers. But I think you can tell what I mean when I say like this rectangular piece, always was kept. Here's the little rings. See how close the clasp is to the T-track? The clasp right next to the T-track. And only with the New Hope, do you see like this distance here, the flash gun. But here again, the rectangle. And then over here, it's like they took the basic design and just put it on steroids, made it just so much more beautiful with the etchings, the little designs, the brass accents. This is absolutely gorgeous. Well, that's it. I mean, you can take a look at the different plaques. Hope you enjoyed that. There's not many people who have all four to be able to compare and contrast. So I wanted to sort of put that out there on YouTube. Pretty special. And I'm really, really happy to have all of these. This is kind of what I set out to do all those years ago. It took the better part of 10 years to get this thing done. Really happy with the condition of the ones I have. Again, not perfect. I can see little scratches here or there, but definitely good enough for me. And I'm lucky to live in a desert where the degeneration of some of these lightsabers, especially the rubberized grips, is not too bad. I still have all the rubber on mine, believe it or not. It hasn't been stripped, which is like a minor miracle. A lot of other versions of these, they're like falling apart, badly scratched. So I wouldn't call these things mint, but I would call them, near mint, and none of them with, fatal damage. All the lightsabers are basically pristine. Might be a little few scratches here or there in the acrylic cases. I'm happy that the mirror bases are unbroken with very minimal damage. So there you go. This is my Vader collection. Original trilogy signature, and then Revenge of the Sith. I'm having a pretty big Master Replicas lightsaber piece come in. I'm really nervous about it. Paid a very, very high price. It's still lower than what it normally goes for, but it's serious business, really, really high price. It's like you collect statues and you think, 1,000 is a lot for a statue. Like, my Thanos Avengers Endgame, that was like, maybe a little bit over 1,000. You think that's high money, but these lightsabers, man, they're like jewelry. They're like gold chains, man. They're very, very expensive. And so I got one coming in. Unfortunately, it's being shipped from New York, UPS, ground, which is a fiasco. But I'm praying that it comes in undamaged with, not just the lightsaber. Normally the lightsaber comes in one piece, but I'm hoping that lightsaber doesn't come with any defects or scratches or anything like that. I don't think so. But the thing that you hold your breath is the acrylic case, which can easily get damaged because it's so fragile, and of course the base with cracks and stuff. So we'll see, but I'll be making a video of that because that is an heirloom piece, very, very beautiful piece, and very, very few videos of that on YouTube. And I hope to do it justice with the quality that I'm delivering with my, higher end, a little bit slightly better iPhone camera. So that's what's going to come up next in the lightsaber world, and we'll go from there. But yeah, there it is. All 4 in a row. I'm going to put these back on my mantelpiece, and I hope you enjoyed and learned a little bit more about how Vader's lightsaber has evolved over the decades, actually. And until next time, do take care.